Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 9 of the Sutta Studies Rains Retreat 2024. And the main theme today is the cessation of eye-making. Nobody smiling? Yeah. Must be some smiles there. We finally realized, well, we've got to the cessation. Whether you realize it or not is up to you. But anyway. So last time I talked mostly about the how eye-making is created or develops, and I delineated 4 different stages. From the very, very kind of pre-conscious level of underlying dispositions to the arising of eye-making, a second, to the arising of I am, a second, and then once I arises, once the concept of I is there, usually it looks around for some affirmation, something to identify with. And since there is these 5 groups, when we're born, there's these 5 groups: the body, feelings, perception, mental activities, and consciousness. So those are right there available to us, to I, to identify with. So that's one of the first levels, or most primal source of identification, the 5 groups of grasping. And once there is this identification, and sometimes, and mostly, it goes a bit further, that one then has some self-views, some views to kind of reinforce and pad out this identification. I'm feeling this, I'm conscious of that, this is my perception, etc. So these 4 levels, going from the most subtle to the most sophisticated, I would say, self-views. And then just for the sake of explaining the process of cessation of eye-making, I just take this in reverse now, starting off with the coarse level of self-views to identification, and then down to the underlying dispositions. So buckle your seatbelt. This will have to be a very short summary, because I'm summarizing 100 pages of this book here. But I mean, in the book, it's very, very comprehensive. So of course, the main point is that first of all, it's helpful if we can designate kind of what level of sophistication that we're working at, what level of eye-making is relevant to you at this time. Are you very conscious of your self-views, for example? Maybe at this time it's helpful to investigate self-views. Or is it identification? Or, probably for many people, it's a bit early to investigate underlying dispositions, but but maybe they do become obvious to us, But when you can investigate what level is more relevant to you at this time, then you can look in the book and find out the theory and then the practices the Buddha gave. And of course, the Buddha was teaching for 45 years, so he had a whole range of different techniques to provide themes for reflection and contemplation. He met people who were at different levels, I guess you could say, different levels of eye-making. So he had to adjust his teaching or provide his teaching to be effective for them at that level, you see. But we come along and we just pick up the whole Pali Canon, right? So rather than have the Buddha there fine-tuned to us as individuals, saying, "Oh, you're at the level of eye-making, of I am," so You need this kind of teaching, you see. So we have to know that for ourselves. We have to rely upon ourselves, self-awareness, to know what level is useful for us to work on. If we're, if we aren't too aware of that, well, maybe just having a cursory read of the whole range might give you, oh, right, that sounds, it sounds very interesting for me, or this sounds like something that's very relevant to me right now. This kind of meditation, or that kind of, that's what I just heard there was very interesting. Like the two main basis causes of identification, ignorance, and craving. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit here, but just in general, I'll give you a general overview first. So what's relevant to you now? Ignorance or craving? Then from there, okay, maybe ignorance now. What's this about? And then you can focus on that, which is about 30 pages in here. Ignorance is a heavy one, So there's a lot about ignorance in here. So anyway, this is how we can use it, be more effective for our practice anyway, rather than just read the whole thing and to be really, well, even when I was reading it, I got a little bit confused. So I had to make some notes. Because there's a lot in there. It's really packed. It's packed full of information, Just on one page alone, I could have dwelled for a whole day or a whole week on it, meditating on it, So anyway, so we start off with self-views anyway. Cursory overview of self-views. The cessation of self-views. So generally you can say there's two kinds of views. There's views in general, and then there's specific views about self. And with views in general, hopefully you read the first page, right, of this self-views. Buddha gave the story of the blind people kind of investigating the elephant. Yeah, and they all got part of it, right? One the leg, one the ear, one the tail, one the stomach. And then the king asked them to describe an elephant, and of course they all had different opinions. But they only had part of the picture. So our views are really only part of the picture. Just like I like to see it, kind of analogy is just like how you're seeing right now, your view right now. See, I have that view of this from here to this side here, see, and you have that view this way, right? So I see this part, but you see that part. Huh? But if I say, no, my view is right, all your views are all crazy, you're wrong. There's no Buddha image behind me, you see, because I can't see it. You're crazy, But only because I don't see that view, So that's the problem with views. It's very, very limited. Probably, every single person on this planet has a different view. Okay? If you put them all together, the wise person can put them all together, we get the bigger picture, right? We get the whole picture. But if we stick to our own view, we get a very limited perspective of things. So the Buddha with that story is making a joke of it, of course, kind of making fun of it, people with their views. And then, of course, at the end, the blind people even come to a fight. They fight each other. And the king was very, very amused. So when you see people sometimes arguing about views, it can be very humorous. Absurd. It's just a view. It's only a view, The trouble is we all have views, right? Political views, religious views, all kinds of views. But that's just normal. Just like we have our eyes open, we see. But just keep in mind that's only one perspective, only one view. Just seeing one part of the picture, the bigger picture. See? And whether we know it or not, we all have these views, and they can, if we don't understand them properly, they can also lead into more fuel for I-making. When you have a view, I believe, I think, this is my opinion, then you defend yourself. But it's only a view. Is it worth defending? Turn your head somewhere else and you get a different view. different view. Oh. So, then there are specific views about the self. I am like this, I am like that, I'm the other. Those we can recognize that also they're very, very relative. This one day you're tired. The next day you feel energetic. Who am I really? I'm just these changing conditions, really. so, 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 first of all, but with that, the Buddha did point out there was a view which was skillful. There's unskillful views and skillful views. So the Buddha designated right view as the first factor of the Eightfold Path, right view. And basically, there's specifics about right view, but generally it's acknowledging the principle of causality, that our actions do have results. If we do the right practice, we can get results. That there are people who are practicing rightly, and generally the principle of cause and effect relates to our own activities, our own action, kamma, principle of kamma, based upon the principle that skillful actions give pleasant results, unskillful action give unpleasant results. That's basically right view. And then there are specifics about it too. But the Buddha also pointed out two dangers of view. One of the most serious ones is wrong view. Because if you have some wrong view, it's like you're going in the wrong direction. Huh? Somebody tells you, oh, that's the way to Wise Man's Ferry, that way. Huh? Well, good luck. If you go around the planet, you might get there. But if somebody gives you the right view, well, okay, you're on your way, right? Doesn't mean you'll arrive there, but at least you're going in the right direction. And the second one is the hanging on to the views. Even hanging on to the right view is not right. Because the Buddha said he taught the Dhamma as a raft, the raft to take you across, not to hold on to. See? He gave the analogy of somebody crossing the river. You use your raft to cross the river, but then you carry the raft with you, do you? You leave the raft behind because it's only useful on water, not on land. Yeah? So we hold these views lightly. You can say we hold on to right view because it's a skillful view, but then when you practice, you don't need to hold it anymore because this gets me to Wise Man's Ferry. Before I just have to believe that, have a belief in that. That's the direction there. But when I get there, oh, right, it is correct. I don't need to believe that anymore because I know now. See? But in the beginning, it can be helpful to, at least have faith in that view anyway. So, yeah. So the second level is identification, and this is where the Buddha gave, a lot, probably his most teachings with that to do with cessation of identity, because it's a very tricky business. Building up on identification, and grasping of ourselves. So there is a theory about it. In this, I broke it down into theory and practice, because the theories, maybe it's only 10 pages, is it? The practice is the next 20 pages or something rather. But again, there is a right way of practicing. So basically, the Buddha distinguished three procedures. As you can imagine that, because of identification, how many people have actually recognized the danger of identification? Isn't the world based upon identification? I am this and I am that, and I'm somebody, and I got this, I got this career, or I got this much money in the bank, I got this education, etc. But how many people recognize the danger of that? You have this career, and then you lose it. Identify with your career, and then no career anymore. How many people have committed suicide because of that? Because it's only a career, And if you look at the qualifications, or you look at the skills you need for that career, you can probably, if you're flexible, not too closed in on it, you can use them in other ways, use them differently. I was studying engineering, so now when I become a monk, I can build roads and I can hammer on, do a bit of construction. Of course, I don't make any money at it, but no. We have to be very, very flexible in monastic life because there's no university course for it. maybe I could start one. Professor of monasticism. Probably have nobody, especially at university with young people. It doesn't seem like a very kind of positive career choice, is it? No. Salary, 0. No. But we could say maybe pension plan, heaven, nibbana. Yeah. No. So like I mentioned, there is, for identification, there are 2 root causes, craving and ignorance. Ignorance is basically the root cause of all our suffering. But because it is so, passive, you can say, because it is so obscure, do you know what ignorance is? I don't know. That's what ignorance is. So you can say that's the passive cause, and then the active one is craving. Fairly obvious, isn't it? Craving, fairly obvious. If you actually have it designated, what is craving now? Because again, it's so much a part of our everyday life. There's even one scripture that says that craving is so insidious, so all-enveloping, all-encompassing, that can even be mistaken for a self. People identify with, I'm the craver. I crave this and I crave that, and that build a life around the craving. It's called consumerism. Is that being a bit naughty? Keeps the economy going anyway. Isn't it? Our whole life is, based, well, a lot of people's life anyway, commercial life, based upon looking at commercials and you need this and you need that and stirring up your craving, isn't it? When you stop and think, well, what do I really need? Well, you can get by with very little actually. But if you look at the advertisements, it just seems to be, wow, I never have enough. I never have enough. I got an old model phone. I got an old model this. Never going to be good enough. But that's fine anyway. We're old-fashioned. So we know that there's these 2 root causes of identification, and basically, in the chanting we do, I think every day, we do the chanting about dukkha, jati pi dukkha, just morning chanting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, at the very end it says, in short, the 5 groups of grasping are dukkha. So what it's saying is, in effect, identification is dukkha. Identification, identifying with the self, is a root of suffering. All the other parts of it, all the sorrow, lamentation, grief, despair, it's pain and despair, it's due to identification. So once we get onto that, which we can focus on that, try and realize the cessation of it, no more dukkha. Simple. Of course, we do have to face ignorance and craving. Yeah. Not quite so simple. So anyway, it was the Buddha gave a very simple very simple explanation of how to deal with ignorance and craving. Is it on the first page here? With the fading away of ignorance, with the arising of true knowledge, and cessation of craving, renewal of being in future is not generated. Or in other words, suffering is not generated again. So fading away of ignorance, and with the arising of true knowledge and the cessation of craving. It's that very simple 3 lines here. But then the practice goes on for 30 pages. So working at these two, ignorance and craving, take ignorance first because it's one of the more difficult ones. So the Buddha, true knowledge, the Buddha said basically true knowledge was understanding the Four Noble Truths. And there is a threefold, I distinguish a threefold coming together of practices. First one needs the right method of contemplation. Then there's the right mode of contemplation. Then there is the objects to contemplate. You got that? 3? Yeah. Okay, that's not too bad. It gets bigger. So I already covered the method of contemplation. I mentioned with the Dhamma Vichaya. There's various places in the Pali Canon where it mentions that have a thorough investigation, an inner exploration, and there's anupassati in the development of mindfulness, to contemplate, it means to look at again and again and again. Then the Dhamma Vichaya, to examine with wisdom, investigate thoroughly, and test it all around. So basically, this contemplation is not just thinking, but it's an experiential investigation, trying to have a direct experience of these qualities. Then there is the mode of contemplation. The Buddha gave 3 principal modes of contemplation, how we contemplate. There's the mode of the Four Noble Truths. So know what the object is, the subject is, know the cause of it, the cessation of it, and then the path of the cessation. That's one mode. And important to be able to go through the whole 4 modes. Because a lot of people have investigated suffering, right? How many people have investigated the cause of suffering, though? Philosophers, artists, a lot of them they've suffered a lot. Poets, a lot of suffering for poets. But how many have contemplated the cause of suffering? Rather than make a living out of it. Make beautiful poetry out of it. Or all the heartbreak songs are made out of it. Heartbroken songs out of suffering. But how many have contemplated the cause of suffering? Shifts their whole awareness. Not to mention the cessation of suffering and the path to the cessation of suffering. So we can follow that 4-step sequence. We arrive at the path because we practice it, at the cessation of suffering because we practice the path then. The second mode, which is probably the second most popular, most well-known one in the Pali Canon, is through the 3 characteristics: to contemplate impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no permanent self. And the third one, which is very rarely mentioned, but it's also quite frequent in the Pali Canon, is to contemplate the gratification, the danger, and the escape. Have you heard of that one before? But it's quite often in the Pali Canon, yeah. And I think, this is my personal opinion anyway, that these 3 modes perhaps apply to different temperaments of people. For example, probably the intellectual person is more inclined to contemplate the 3 characteristics. And then the person who has a lot of suffering maybe contemplates the Four Noble Truths because they're right, they're really relevant to them. So what is this suffering? It's right there. And then, if they're reminded by the Buddha, now, not just focus on the suffering, but look at the cause. Look at how it arises. What's the arising of it? And if you can do that, it gives you a significant change in your perspective. And the suffering can be very, very overwhelming, but when you try to investigate the causes, hey, wait a minute. First thing you might notice is not there all the time. It can seem like it if you're really indulging in it, trying to figure your way out, trying to think your way out of it. But look at it itself. You might notice it kind of comes and goes. It comes in like a fog. Sometimes it's stronger than other times. But if you look even closer, you might notice there is some background to it, some background causes. For example, when you think about it, when you just think about it, oh, poor me, oh, why am I suffering? It increases, right? But you can step back a little bit and try to observe it as a process. This is a process happening. And you're not so directly involved in it, trying to figure it out. You got your personal investments. It has to go away. Doesn't it change a bit? Yeah. It's now you're looking at it rather than you're being it. Huh? So when you contemplate the arising and the passing, maybe you can see it differently. Not to mention cessation, hopefully, too. Maybe you notice sometimes it actually passes away. Not just when you're sleeping, but sometimes it does pass away. Like when you can break out of your kind of this kind of feedback loop. Suffering is there. How can I get out of it? And then is it why did it happen to me? Blah 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 blah. And you can just relax a bit, and then not so intense anymore. Not to mention spreading some friendliness to it, some friendliness to the suffering, and oh, wow, depends upon your state of mind. And the third one, gratification, danger, and escape. Perhaps this is useful for people who have a lot of desire, lust or desire. They're stuck on the gratification, but look behind it. How many people have noticed the danger with their gratification? Maybe only the morning after, when you have your hangover. Not you. I mean, when people have their hangover, they think I shouldn't drink, or I shouldn't party so badly, or whatever, severely, or something or other. When you contemplate the danger, then maybe you might be able to find the escape. Okay, right, yeah. Why do I have to seek this gratification? Why is there all this going on? Why do I need to indulge like that? To try and escape my suffering, to try and blend in with other people, try and be sociable. Look at it. Maybe you noticed an escape from it then. Yeah. And then there's the door, what Tiradhammo, I say, to escape. And then the objects of contemplation. There's I think a fairly well-known scripture. It's called The Handful of Leaves. Yep. The Buddha was walking in the countryside one day, and then he stopped near a forest. He picked up a handful of leaves, and he said to the monks, which is more, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? He said, well, of course, the leaves in the forest are more. The Buddha said, well, what I know is comparable to the leaves in the forest. But what you need to know is like comparable to this handful of leaves here. All you have to know is this much. There is suffering, the arising of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path of cessation of suffering. It's all you have to know. Don't need to know anything else. Yeah. He's not trying to, dumb us down, but pointing at what's really relevant to contemplate. Suffering is really important to contemplate. Yeah. And with that, the cause of suffering is the 5 khandhas, right? Grasping, the five groups of grasping. Yeah. Or sometimes identification happens also. The second most prominent source of identification is the 6 senses. Well, the 6 senses can be included in 5 groups of grasping under the materiality. See? There's the senses, there's the physical senses, then there is the physical objects that we sense. It's all materiality. Okay? But for some people, the senses are very relevant or very immediate source of identification. I am seeing, I am hearing. Rather than ear is hearing, eye is hearing. Yeah? It's I is hearing. And the 5 groups of grasping, this is probably, for some people it's a bit more subtle because, 4 of these groups are mental. Feeling, sanya, perception or recognition, I say. Sankhara and vinyan. Yeah. But for some people it's a bit hard to observe these perhaps. What's the arising of consciousness, cessation of consciousness, of mental activities. or recognition or memory or something. So we have the mode of contemplation, we have the method, the mode, and the objects of contemplation. If you put them all together, you got a few choices here. So you got to decide for yourself what's more relevant, huh? What object to contemplate, what mode to use. And I mentioned again, with these modes, it's important to be able to go through to the end. You know, gratification. Don't stay with gratification. Contemplate the danger, and then move on to the escape, or the Four Noble Truths. What is suffering, the cause, the cessation and path. And we come to craving. So there's basically, craving is, maybe you've read hopefully the chapter on how craving is created. The chapter in here, which is very, very quite detailed. I took quite a few different parts about craving in the Pali Canon together, and it can be a bit frightening actually, because craving is so enveloping. It's described as a net of craving, and it ensnares. You know, it's the seamstress that sews us to the round of rebirth. But craving is also, you can say, the root of life, because one of the cravings is a craving for existence, bhava tanha. Craving to survive is like our survival instinct. That's how deep it is. But the point is that we have these sources of craving, but to become aware of them, you still have this desire for existence. But what kind of existence? We still have, a desire for a very coarse kind of existence, or related to the 5 groups of grasping, or do we a craving for an existence in nibbana? I won't ask for any hands. We'd like to have, but yes, yeah. That's what, in one of the scriptures, it wasn't the Buddha who gave this scripture, it was Ananda, the Buddha's right-hand disciple, who remembered all the Buddha's teachings. And somebody asked him about the way to awakening, and he said it was the way of craving. It's a craving for nibbana. That's the way out of craving, Yes, but the point is that if you have, craving is there, but if you can channel it now, what's it called in psychology? Transmuting? No. Anyway, so there's a way for it, there's a name for it. Transforming it. The craving is there, but now you transform it. It's like desire. There are 2 kinds of desire. There's kama chanda, desire for sense pleasures, and there's dhamma chanda, desire for dhamma, you see? So there's desire is still there. Desire isn't the baddie. It's what desire focuses on. Does it focus on the sense realm, which is going to be very, 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 very uncertain and very, very fragile and very undependable. But focusing your desire on Dhamma, there's a different quality to it. But the desire is still there, But then once you've focused on Dhamma practice and you realize the Dhamma, the desire fades away because you're already there. It's like your desire to get to, Wiseman's Ferry or something. Once you get there, what happens to your desire? Leave on the ferry, right? You don't need it anymore because you're there. If you get that far, Otherwise, you might increase your desire or your craving and never get there. So anyway, for craving, first of all, there's 3 kinds of craving: for sense pleasures, for existence, and for non-existence. See? So even like if we're craving to be free of suffering, but you're still craving. You're craving for non-existence of suffering. So you can't quite get out of it. You can't just try and get rid of craving, because trying to get rid of craving is still craving. So you're stuck with it. So anyway, there is two ways that the Buddha mentioned. Well, two ways that I picked out of the various teachings the Buddha gave. One was the way of relinquishment. Buddha actually talked about, once you recognize craving, try and let go of it. As I said in here, the relinquishment of craving. And sometimes you can recognize that, just how, especially if you're contemplating by way of, the danger of craving, for example. See how dangerous craving is. You lose your point of view, you lose your perspective. You get emotionally hijacked by it. Wow, this is a bit dangerous there. Better play it down or let it go. Not encourage it or not increase it more. And there's two ways for the way of relinquishment. You can try and relinquish craving directly, by recognizing it, trying to see its danger in it, and then probably escape from it. And there's also the focusing on the supports for craving. In the dependent origination teaching, the direct cause of craving is feeling. So if you can contemplate the nature of feeling, then feeling does not give rise to craving. Mostly it's the craving for pleasant feeling. But if you're contemplating feeling, observing it, even pleasant feeling, the Buddha, there's one of Ajahn Chah's saying one time, I was there when he said it, maybe he even said it to me one time. Anyway, he said it close by, and he said, turned to me and he said, dukkha is dukkha, but sukha is dukkha too, You get that? Sukha is happiness or well-being. Well-being is suffering too, What? Happiness is suffering because it's impermanent, not suffering in itself. Happiness is pleasant in itself, but it's going to pass away. You can't be happy forever, basically. You can have joy and the factors of awakening, but not happiness. So recognizing, just the nature of feelings, for example, pleasant feeling is impermanent. Unpleasant feeling is unpleasant. A neutral feeling is, it's like delusion. Can't recognize it, can't see it. There are other supports for craving. I don't know if I should rub it in too much, but because craving is associated with other kinds of, like just pointing out craving, for example. I mean, usually it's not quite so bare or raw, but there are other supports for it, such as frequently mentioned is delight and passion, nandi raga. Or there's passion, desire, affection, thirst, fever, passion, delight, affection, infatuation, attachment. So sometimes maybe this, what comes across as craving maybe is one of these. It's got a different kind of connotation to it or different context to it. Like most people talk about desire. I don't know, one of the chantings you do about, I think it's the one, Imina Punya Kamina, the sharing of merit one. Do you do it in English? Well, there's been a new change in England. They've changed one of the lines there. Because the old line was, may desire and passion, may desire and affliction. Who chants it anyway? May desire and affliction not take hold or something. Well, it's now changed to make craving and affliction not take hold. Because the word was actually tanha. And desire is another little bit of a tricky one because we all have desire to some degree, but craving is like really impassioned desire, like infatuation. It's really, really powerful desire. Whereas desire, in a positive sense, is actually one of the factors of the 4 bases of psychic power. Chanda. Chanda is one of the bases of psychic power. Right desire, see? So it actually, its craving is more severe. It literally means, tanha literally means thirst. When it's thirsty. Hunger and thirst, yes. Yep. Yeah, it's like a real basic instinctive drive. Yeah, yeah. But desire is a little bit more conditional. Especially desire. Desire can be focused on different things, you see. But sometimes, for some people, this craving may be manifest in different forms, maybe as delight, or sometimes it comes across as affection, Anyway, so that's the way of relinquishment. And the second way to deal with craving is a way of development. That is developing skillful qualities. There is qualities like, for example, developing generosity, can counteract your craving for sensual pleasures, for example. Practicing generosity, like developing some of the virtues. And of course, the obvious ones to be developed are the factors of awakening. Remember those? That was only a few lectures ago, wasn't it? Factors of awakening, 7 factors of awakening, the 4 developments of mindfulness, and the Eightfold Path. Those qualities are all skillful qualities. It's like, again, shifting your craving or desire from negative things like sensual desire to positive ones. Now, desire for developing the factors of awakening. And these qualities then lift up the mind, broaden the mind, brighten the mind. And if you have, joy in your mind, does desire for, more pizza ever affect you? Don't think of pizza when you think of joy, or equanimity, So, so it's different quality, you can say. Gives a different quality to the mind. So, and then of course, we have the theory here, but then doing the practice. So there's quite a few exercises, but what the practice is. So for the cessation of craving, this one of the teachings says is a complete waning and ceasing, giving up, forsaking, releasing, relinquishing of craving. So you got all those: relinquishing, releasing, forsaking, giving up. Sometimes maybe when you're trying to relinquish craving, sometimes it is just the giving up, the letting go of it. Other times it is releasing it. Other times it is making you have to forsake it. You have to make actually a bit of more of a resolution to kind of forsake it. Yeah. So it's the waning and ceasing, giving up, forsaking, releasing, relinquishing of the same craving. So it's quite a few different possibilities. And because craving is so kind of endemic, so predominant in our being, we have to work at many different levels, perhaps. It's come to us many different levels. We take it up, we have to put it down again. We grab onto it, we have to let go of it again. And one of the direct contemplations with regard to craving for sense pleasures anyway is to reflect upon the dangers of sense pleasures. So the Buddha gave many talks about the dangers of sense pleasures. He did acknowledge that they do give happiness or gratification, I would say, but not satisfaction. So there's a danger. The danger of sense pleasures is that they do give some pleasure, you can say. That's why it's a pleasure. And I'm just reading about the kind of neuroscience of the brain, that's what neuroscience is, isn't it? And he's talking about how when there is pleasure, of course, dopamine is secreted, and and many other chemicals are secreted in the brain, and so they get the pleasure principle, it's triggered off. It's very, very hard to break that. That becomes a source of addiction then. Your whole body gets kind of chemically changed, you see. Yeah. But, there is ways to actually change those chemical processes. Like I say, if you if you get some pleasure out of meditation, see, now you're still linked into that pleasure loop, getting pleasure from your sense experience now through meditation and not through senses. Then I used to tell people in Switzerland that they should think about the pleasure principle when they're meditating, especially when they're meditating by themselves, because many people would go by the clock. See, so they think, oh, I've got to sit there, and as long as I can, the more I sit, the better meditation is. But the longer they sit, usually they get more pain. So they end up, they sit there to the pain, then they quit. So you end off with pain as your result of meditation. It's not going to work very long. You're soon going to take up golf or tennis or something rather. But I said, just sit there as long as you feel pleasure. Don't look at the clock, just look at your feelings. As long as it's pleasant, you enjoy the experience, then stop. And then you're left with a positive impression then. So next time you think of meditation, and neuroscientists have found that the strongest impression you have is the last one. The last impression you have is the strongest one, you see. So if your last impression of meditation is pleasant, it's the strongest, you get addicted, but in a good way. But most people, they just sit there as long as they can, the pain, and then the last impression is pain. So then when they're sitting there watching television and think, oh, I should meditate. Pain, no thanks. Next program, please. So you got to be able to recognize what the human condition is and try to work with it in a skillful way. Just to kind of always push yourself through the pain, it's not going to work. It's not how your brain works anyway. Just sit as long as you feel pleasant. Don't quote me. Yeah. Maybe the last impression would be a nice warm place down here, fire down here. Maybe that's your last impression, positive. So there is, this is the identification part of it. Then there is, of course, the conceit I am. And the conceit I am is getting more and more subtle. So, this is still going to rise, but again, if we're more conscious of it, we can actually cease. We can be more careful about not allowing it to grow or increase. Like I define this the arising of I am. The Buddha called it a conceiving, or it was translation of conceiving, manyata. It means basically it's self-referencing. You self-reference things all the time. So when you're conscious of that, first of all, you're aware of, as soon as you see something, I'm seeing. Wait a minute. I saw that. I'm aware of that. So then you recognize, okay, don't feed that I seeing now anymore. There is visible object. There is the seeing. The I here is seeing, not the I here is seeing. You see? There is seeing, there is hearing, there is smelling, there is tasting, there is touching, there's thinking going on. But how many of us can be conscious of that I arising, usually very, very close to the sense impression? A thought arises, I'm thinking. But if you're aware of that, don't go into the I anymore. And one of the Buddha's most profound teachings was to Bhadia, I would say. Bhadia wasn't even a monk. He was just a traveling a spiritual seeker. He came to the Buddha and he tried to. Buddha was on alms round and he asked the Buddha, what's the teaching what's the most profound teaching for awakening? The Buddha said, I'm on alms round. Come back later. And he really persisted, and I guess the Buddha recognized his conscientiousness. So the Buddha gave him this very, very succinct teaching. He said, in the seeing, only the seeing. In the hearing, only the hearing. In the sensing, only the sensing. Only those. In other words, no self-referencing. No self-referencing, no subject, no object, no subject object. There's no problem with trying to deal with objects and subjects. This is the way to the end of suffering, he said. So, can you do that? Seeing, only seeing. Hearing, only hearing. Yes, it is, yes. This was heard, but not understood. I heard it many times, but yes, yeah. Yes, but I mean, obviously, the Buddha realized that it is possible to do that, and if one can do that, has a very, very strong effect. So that's the way when you notice this I arising, then step away from it. Don't allow this I making, this self-referencing to keep being fed all the time. Then there was one story of this one monk who was, his other fellow monks thought he was enlightened. But he said, no, I'm not enlightened, But he said, I do not regard these 5 groups of grasping as self or belonging to the self, but I'm not an arahant without outflows. Because, there is still, he said, there is still remains an uprooted residue of conceit, I am, of desire, I am, of underlying disposition, I am. Yeah. He was what they call, he was on the 3rd level of awakening. He was doing pretty good, pretty well, It wasn't quite an arahant yet. However, when he continued his practice, he abide contemplating the rise and fall of the 5 groups of grasping. This is materiality. This is feeling, etc. Arising, passing. And then finally, he was thus contemplating the rise and fall of the 5 groups of grasping. Finally, his mind was liberated from the residue of I am, desire I am, underlying disposition to I am. Was uprooted, comes to be uprooted, and he became an arahant. So it is possible. The Dhamma is timeless, you got no excuses. And then when it comes to the underlying dispositions, as I mentioned, the underlying dispositions are very similar to what's called the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters are traditionally designated as the 10 different fetters, or the things that bind you to existence. So the different levels of awakening, you began to work through the fetters. So the first level, the sotapanna, stream enterer, has already given up doubt, self-view, and attachment to rites and rituals. That's the first 3 fetters that fall away. So the attachment to rites and rituals is not an underlying disposition, but the other ones are. Yeah. So and then the next level of awakening, the greed and aversion are reduced, and at the 3rd level they're eliminated completely, and only at the arahant stage of the last 5, like restlessness and conceit, finally they're let go of. But that's then it gets right down to the very, very fundamental roots of our existence in the underlying dispositions. So if you notice that they're gone, then you're pretty far on the path. It's the only way they can be eliminated completely. So we work through the various stages. I mean, and I also, of course, there are many meditations. You can use the meditation, say, on the most famous one, the most useful, most popular one in the scriptures is about impermanence. The Buddha says, is the body permanent or impermanent? Or impermanent, yeah. What is impermanent? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Well, it's unpleasant. And what is impermanent, unpleasant? Is it self or not self? Not self. Yeah, obvious. Yeah. So, but of course, we have to keep contemplating this again and again and again because, those factors, especially the underlying dispositions, the arising of the idea I am is so so common to us, so commonplace. It just sneaks up on us unless we're vigilant, unless you have more mindfulness and more clarity, more wisdom how to deal with it. When the I am arises, what do you do with it? I slap it down. No, you don't. Step out of self-referencing and, and recognizing, oh, there's the idea. There's a thought of I. It's only a thought. It's only an idea. Except be the one who knows it, rather than be the one who tries to conquer it, you see. You just create another I there. It's the conquering I, which is hard work.
Can't it just be the idea of self that's wrong? And that the self would just be a transitory thing? It's an impermanent thing, but it still exists as an impermanent thing.
As an impermanent thing, yes, yeah. It's a process, yeah.
It's not a fixed thing, like, is it?
Yeah, yeah. It's a process, yeah.
So it's still a self, it's just not a fixed self.
Yes, yeah. That's what yeah. There's no, that's why the translation of anatta was no self, literally. But I think, it's a bit misleading because that's why I translate it as no permanent self. You see. Yeah. There is still a conventional self, so to speak.
The grasping to the idea of permanence, that's the
Yes.
part, not the actual fact that it's an impermanent thing. It's not
Yes, yep.
because something impermanent is not too miserable, it's just has to.
Yep.
So only if you want it to be permanent that it becomes miserable.
Yep. It's like trying to hold back the river, river's flowing. And, if you recognize, okay, you have to you have to recognize the movement there. Then you don't get drowned in it. Go with the flow, you say. Go with the flow. End up down in Mangrove Creek.
Did you say that, or someone said the other day that Ajahn Chah said arahants still have craving and aversion, but they just don't grasp them.
Yeah.
That's something like that.
Yeah.
It's not desire, but
Greed and aversion, yeah.
they don't grasp it.
Yep, they don't grasp it. So,
Recognize it, but
yep, yep,
exist.
yep, yep. So if you don't grasp it, then there's nobody grasping these things. So no subject, no object, and they just flow away. They rise and pass away, rise and pass away, and nobody home to own them. Then,
But it's not necessarily then that all conditioned things are dukkha, it's just that it's the grasping for those conditioned things that
Yeah.
are dukkha.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like not the thing, the world itself is not dukkha, it's not.
No. It's our wrong approach to it.
Wrong
Yeah.
approach to it,
Yeah. We think it shouldn't be dukkha. Yeah.
It's just
It should please me. It shouldn't be that way. It should please me. It should make me happy.
It's dangerous because we're not able to accept it.
Yeah. Not able to get out of the way, let impermanence happen. So I leave you with the practice now for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. There'll be no talks for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. I'll be practicing too, so take my book with me. Finish the chapters myself. So, any questions? Last questions? I'll be back in 2 weeks.
Is there a place for like using labels during your meditation moments so like not identify with
I would say it can be helpful sometimes, you see. But again, it's helpful not to get too attached to it or fixed on it, yeah. But I found it useful to do that because it kind of sorted out. I just had these thoughts arise, so I just, oh yeah, right, I know it. But having to label them, I have to look at them really carefully and recognize, oh, is that a plan for the future? Is that a memory? Is that what kind of thought is that? But then after a while, the labeling got in the way because the labeling is not the direct experience anymore. It happens after the fact. Yeah.
It's actually
Yep. Yep.
And then when mindfulness becomes more steady and continuous, it becomes quite a gross object, so it just falls away by itself, and then there's just a knowing of whatever arises and passes away. I've always had this difficulty with this word contemplation.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why. I could never actually understand it. And I couldn't actually practice it because I didn't understand what it was until someone showed me a technique to directly just with mindfulness, just to observe, the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch, physical sensations, mental content, and just the arising and passing away of the consciousness with the object. That actually, that kind of makes sense. It's not contemplation, really.
Well, contemplation literally.
It's like having a subject and then kind of going over it. But this other way is just like a direct looking observation.
Yeah.
And that's it. There's nothing else there. Just like the teaching to go here. It's just there's a bird, there's an ear, there's hearing, consciousness arises, but that consciousness is already gone. There's another one arises, another one.
That's actually what contemplation means in Latin. It means to look at again and again and again, to observe again and again. Contum means to again. Yeah. So it just means this. Yeah. It's helpful sometimes to go back to the original meaning of the word. You see, they take on some words like that word in English nowadays usually means to think about. Contemplate that. It means to think about it.
Well, the real meaning of it.
Yeah, the real meaning is
Yeah.
Yeah, the same word, like another word is compassion. I think, have compassion for that person, but compassion means to suffer with them. Passion is to suffer in Latin, and calm is with. So to suffer with somebody, that's what compassion is. Be able to suffer with them. But whereas compassion usually means, I feel sorry for you. I'm so wonderful, but I feel sorry for you because you're so suffering. But to suffer with them brings you down to their level, you see. To open their heart to them, be with them, empathize. That's what the original meaning of compassion means, you see. So, yes, yeah. Translations, yes, yeah. And it's an ongoing process, like when I was in Switzerland, one of our projects was to translate some of our texts into German and French. And it was a real headache because, some of the words, even in English, they don't really come across. That's why I translate those 5 groups of grasping differently than normally, like consciousness. It doesn't mean anything really. Consciousness, what's that? For most people, it also means that consciousness also means sanya and sankhara too. You perceive it and you think about it. That's you being really conscious of it, you see. It's not just the bare knowing in the 5 groups of grasping, it's just the bare knowing there is a sight there. But you don't know what the sight is yet. Vijnana doesn't know what the sight is. It's sanya that tells you what it is. And then sankhara tells you what to do with it now, how to deal with it, or how to manage it or something. So the consciousness is so vague. It's, I guess for the average person, maybe they don't think about it too much, so it doesn't really matter too much. But or perception is so vague. What does perception mean?
Well, I've heard it referred to as seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness.
Yeah. That's how it usually is presented in the Pali Canon. Yeah.
That way, it's totally different.
Yep.
I used to also think that this consciousness was some big thing.
Yeah.
But it isn't anything like that. It's just arises momentarily with the object and then it's already gone. So it's just like a very momentary phenomenon.
Yeah. If you read some of the details in here, I talk about how all these are jnanas, you see. It means knowing. So there's vijnana, Sa-jnana, pa-jnana, yeah, they're all kinds of knowing, you see. So vijnana is knowing, but it's distinguishing knowing, or it discriminates, just a bare knowing. And sa-jnana means together. So it's knowledge which puts things together. So associated knowing, you see. So if you look at the Pali, then you can get that understanding of it a little bit more clearly, I think. But then we have these words, perception, and what's that mean? Everybody has their own perception of it. Yes. But again, it's become, in a way, you have to kind of play back and forth, because those are the words that have been traditionally used. So if I say, associated knowing, they wouldn't know I'm talking about sanya, you see, or even recognizing. They don't know what you're referring to, Or if I say bare knowing, what's that? That's my jargon for vijnana. So
Where does memory come in terms of I making? There's a lot of self-referencing would be to your own memory, wouldn't it, of
Yep.
what you think you are?
Yep.
Where is that?
That's a sanya is a type. Sanya is more. I mean, in Pali, in Thai, they say sanya is memory. It's kwamjam, memory. It's very, very similar to memory. The sanya, perception, recognizing. You have to have reference to the memory to be able to, it's like you see something, and then your brain's running a search program. What is it? 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 But memory itself is actually very, very vague. There's no one center in the brain which has memory in it. There's somatic memory in the body. There's, so it is a very, very vague thing. There's not one little pigeonhole in the brain that is memory.
And when the body dies, that sort of impression exists in the mind or something.
Yeah.
Stories of people who've had heart transplants and have had dreams of the memories of the donor.
Yeah.
Suggesting that there's memories in the heart.
Yeah.
But then to exist independent of the physical, of the rupa as well.
Yeah.
That process happens all the time, that process of perception, where it kind of goes back to recognizing that, makes a reference to something that's already been seen in the past. That happens all the time.
Yep.
Every time there's some kind of seeing, hearing, smelling,
Yep.
tasting, touching, or whatever,
Yep.
unless you've got really supercharged mindfulness, you won't pick it up.
Yep.
But it's actually happening.
Yep.
And then because you don't pick it up, but it's just this sort of a perception linking it to something, then you think, mind starts thinking about this memory and then making a punch, it gets into action and makes it into a great big story.
Yeah.
But if that sort of recognition is there, if the mindfulness is sharp, it just dies there.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, the process.
Yeah. And the Buddha points out that the sanya can be very, very, what's the word? Is sanya vipalat, is distorted. Can be very distorted. If you don't have a reference to something or other, you say, well, you think it's like that, you think that's what it is. I haven't seen this shape of a clock before, so I just think it must be something else. It must be a mobile phone or something. I don't know what it is. Yeah, because you have no reference to it, But then if you have the memory of it and the association, now you say, oh, that looks like a clock. I still don't know, because can't be sure of it, but it's got numbers on it and it's got a box and it looks like a clock. But am I 100% sure it is a clock? Might be a bomb, because it's got batteries, it's got TNT behind it, But a lot of people, they don't even give a second thought to this memories. They just glance at things. Oh yeah, I see that. I see this. I know that. And misperception. So many times, misperceptions. And of course, the more the more education you have, the more experiences you have, the better repertoire of memory you have. Ideally, until you get older and start forgetting it all. Yes. Yes, yeah. I was trying to, I was my, I don't know what it was. I was thinking about something, and I started thinking in German. You see, and then I found myself speaking Thai. I was counting in Thai, not German anymore. So when my languages get mixed up in my brain. I gotta stop and think. Okay, now this is talk German, not Thai. Okay, get ready for tonight. Time for a rest. Yep.